What is going on, everyone? I am back and I am coming at you less than 24 hours after completing my final actual draft in one of my two leagues. Now, for those of you that might have seen my first league that I put up, it was a Yahoo League 12-man PPR, including some trades. So that was pretty interesting. But I think this draft that I did yesterday can be even more so because it's a 10-man standard league through NFL. I know a lot of people still um, have some more questions about standard leagues, so use this as a reference for sure. And on top of that, I think that the team that I put together, I might be a little bit biased, but wow, I think it's a scary good team, and I think championship contender for sure. So let me know what you guys think when it's all said and done. Do you agree? And in the meantime, let's get right into it. I had the eighth pick overall, so I'll do a little bit of analysis all the way throughout. And as you would expect, round by round selection with the first round, the first pick, we've got David Johnson being selected, then Le'Veon Bell, followed up by Antonio Brown. I think this is your standard top three picks at this point. And then Julio Jones, Odell, 4 or 5. Some people might flip these. Some people might put Mike Evans somewhere in there because of the uncertainty with Odell, but certainly no problem here with these selections. And in this league in particular, we had a big run on wide receivers, and I think that's kind of expected in standard leagues because the receivers and running backs are a lot more closer together in terms of what they give. So for that reason, you see some of these elite stud wide receivers go like a Mike Evans afterwards, then Jordy Nelson. And Evans was actually a guy that I was targeting at 8, was hoping he would fall to me. Same with Jordy Nelson. Part of me actually thought I could get Jordy Nelson in the second round, but as soon as I saw him get taken 7th overall, I thought, okay, there's obviously a run on these top-notch receivers. I'm going to have to reevaluate my strategy because initially I wanted to take a guy like Melvin Gordon or if Mike Evans wasn't there. So I kind of pivoted and I thought, all right, what I'm going to do is take the next best available player and in terms of the receiver position, and that is AJ Green by far. So that's exactly what I did, and kind of just crossed my fingers afterwards that a guy like Gordon or Devonta Freeman can fall to me. And the reason that I went with the AJ Green pickup is because that there is such a big drop off, like I said, from these guys like the Jordys, the AJ Greens to the next guy in Michael Thomas, in my opinion. So finishing off the first round, we have LaShawn McCoy dropping to 9th overall. And I was actually debating whether I should take LaShawn McCoy a little bit, but to me, he's the kind of player that gets nicked up, sometimes misses a game, misses some parts of a game, and I just didn't want to invest in that. Also, less in value because it isn't PPR, but still very good value in terms of where he was taken in the first round, in my opinion. And then, kind of a little bit of a surprise, I think, with Jordan Howard being selected at the end of the first round. He's only a sophomore, and maybe a guy like Jay Ajayi would have been a little bit more reliable on a better offense. But still, I can't knock the selection too much because he is that prototypical standard running back. Now, with that, that concludes the first round. So let's move on to the second round. And I mentioned Melvin Gordon, was hoping he would drop to me. Unfortunately, that was not the case. Gets taken right after that Jordan Howard selection. And then afterwards, again, I was doing a lot of finger crossing, but Michael Thomas luckily goes right here at number 12. And I have my pick between a guy like Devonta Freeman, Murray, and Ezekiel Elliott. Now, for me, Freeman automatically better than Murray. And the comparison between Zeke and Freeman was the very actually interesting one for me. Now, I'll do a fantasy outlook for Zeke later on this week before the season starts because it is a really interesting case, but I'll give you my quick take on it. For me, it's basically all on certainty, and I did not want to take Zeke at this point because I really don't know what's happening with that situation. But with that being said, um, if Devonta Freeman wasn't there, I would have probably taken Zeke over DeMarco Murray. That's the only reason I went with Freeman. And I would say to all of you that are wondering where to pick Zeke, the second round is probably where his ADP is kind of leveling out. And if you still get him in the second round, I would probably call that a steal. But moving on, after the Devonta Freeman pick, this is where a run on the runners began, and you will see it. We've got DeMarco Murray, we've got Ezekiel Elliott, then we've got Ajayi, we've got Gurley, and maybe a little bit early for Gurley, but just because you don't know with him on that Rams offense what's going to happen, but there is potential nonetheless. And then this next pick is Marshawn Lynch. Now, to me, I'm a big fan of Marshawn in Oakland, especially in standard leagues. Was actually a guy that I was hoping could fall to me in the third round, but I think it's a combination of the guys that were in this league, what their personal opinions are on Lynch, and then also NFL having him ranked pretty high, that accounted for his selection towards the end of the second round. But I can't knock the decision too much. I think he'll be probably better than Gurley, better than the guy after him being taken in Leonard Fournette, the rookie in Jacksonville. To me, if I'm taking a rookie running back, it's going to be Kareem Hunt. That's going to be the first guy that I pick, and I don't pick him any earlier than the third round. So just keep that in mind if you want some advice. And then finally, we've got Doug Baldwin ending out the second round. Again, he has some value added with Kearse leaving the other day via the trade, but I would like him more in PPR standard scoring. Now, let's go to the third round. After that Doug Baldwin pick, we actually have the guy that I mentioned in Kareem Hunt being selected. And again, I said no earlier than the third round, but for me, the first pick of the third round is way too early for Kareem Hunt. He's just such a big uncertainty, as are all the other rookies. Don't get me wrong, but I just don't know what he's going to provide. And this is a 10-man league, so pretty much this was the 21st pick is kind of equivalent to a second round pick in my opinion. But that's just me. Let's keep moving. We've got Tyreek Hill. This was the biggest reach and biggest shock of pretty much any round in my opinion. There's no reason Tyreek Hill should be going this early ahead of a guy like Dez Bryant or Amari Cooper that you see were picked up next. And, when it's all said and done, I don't mind it because it's going to help out my team in the long run. But just something that I wanted to point out. Now, we've got Dez Bryant, a guy I was hoping would fall to me because after addressing the running back position, I was looking at the next available player. It wasn't really a running back that I liked, so I was focusing on Bryant. I was especially really high on Amari Cooper, but he was taken a couple picks before me. And then afterwards, a guy that I was looking at was Gronk, if he somehow fell to me the third round. And of course, he went the pick right after Amari Cooper. I think this is actually one of the best value picks in this entire draft with Gronk going into the third round. I was really hoping he would come down to me because I guarantee you, if Gronk stays healthy for a full 16 games, he will be a number one round worthy selection because I think he will rival the scoring of all those guys, especially with Edelman being gone for the season now. And then we've got DeAndre Hopkins after him. Again, another guy that you guys have heard that I'm high on. But let's keep going. 27 pick right before me. We've got Brandon Cooks. Again, another guy that I would have drafted if he had fallen to me. But that's just the way that the draft unfolded. I would have liked to get Cooks. I think Brady will look for him more often now that Edelman is gone. Not as often as Gronk, but still enough to warrant this selection, and I think it would have been a steal at this point. And then finally, we get to my pick, and surprisingly, T.Y. Hilton was still on the board. Now, I know that a lot of this is going to be predicated on, is Andrew Luck going to be back healthy? And hey, if he is, I think I got a steal. And if not, if he misses a couple games, I think T.Y. is still so good that he will justify his selection here. And to me, this was just a very good value pick. Ergo, my selection of T.Y. Then afterwards, again, a little bit definitely a reach for me, actually. Christian McCaffrey at the end of the third round. If I am in a standard league, I'm not taking Christian McCaffrey, to be honest with you guys, because a lot of his value is going to come from him being a pass catcher, and he's going to have a lot of touchdowns vultured in the red zone via Stewart and Cam Newton. And then to finish off the third round, we have Terrell Pryor. I think, again, this was a little bit of a reach, more of a PPR guy. There's some other receivers that I would have liked a little bit more, maybe a Crabtree. He's got more of that touchdown potential. But again, we'll see what happens. With all those weapons leaving Washington, maybe he's going to have a breakout year. Now let's move on to the fourth round. We've got Aaron Rodgers being selected, the first pick. And I was actually kind of targeting him. Again, I wouldn't have minded if he fell to me, because I thought he probably presented the best value in terms of guys that I could have that I was looking at. At this point, since I had filled two receiver positions, I was looking at adding another running back, and the guys that I was between were Isaiah Crowe and Lamar Miller. Now, maybe I'm a little biased behind Lamar Miller because I had him last year and he kind of burned me. But man, what I saw last year was not impressive at all from him. And for that reason, I went with Isaiah Crowe instead. Again, I thought this was a good value pick. I've seen him go in the third round, which is too high for me. So this selection in the fourth round, I thought was a good spot. If he can live up to the hype, this will be a very good pick for me to pair up with Devonta Freeman. Next, we've got a little, again, run on running back starting. We got Carlos Hyde. CJ Anderson, to me, this was way too high. I'm not sold on that offensive line or that offense in general in Denver. Then finally, Lamar Miller going. I think at this point it was just a value pick. Lamar Miller definitely has the potential to be a stud. He just has to put it all together in Houston and stay healthy and not get vultured by Alfred Blue. And then to start finishing off this round, we've got Bilal Powell. Again, kind of similar to McCaffrey. Bilal Powell, more of a PPR guy. Also splitting time with Forte, even though I do think he'll overtake him. Not necessarily too high on him in standard leagues. And then we've got Travis Kelce, Jordan Reed, two tight ends in a row. I was hoping Travis Kelce might drop to me in the next round, but that wasn't the case. I didn't really expect it to happen. I was shocked a little bit by the Jordan Reed selection, and then finally we've got Keenan Allen being selected. Allen, more of a PPR guy, definitely, but still at this point, I think a tremendous value pick. Now, let's go to the fifth round. We've got Jimmy Graham being selected, and I was kind of shocked. I know a lot of people are saying that with Graham being 100% healthy, he can vie for being a top 3 tight end, but I would have probably gone with a more conservative pick in a guy like Greg Olsen, who I think is a shoo-in for another 1,000-yard season. But that's me personally. And then we've got Brady going next, a guy that I would have loved to have fallen to me. Wasn't the case. And then I thought this was a great steal at this point. Demaryius Thomas made it all the way to the 5th round. I think that is a reflection of Simeon winning that starting quarterback spot and just the situation of the quarterback play in Denver. It's not consistent. If Peyton Manning of his first year in Denver is still there, obviously Demaryius Thomas is a top 5 receiver, but that's not the case, and I think that's why you saw him fall all the way to round 5. Then we've got Ty Montgomery, similar case to Powell and McCaffrey. Then we've got Devontae Adams. You see 2 Green Bay Packers in a row, and I think the hope with Devontae was you've got Aaron Rodgers throwing him the football, so a lot of hope in that. And then another guy in Danny Woodhead. Look, this would, again, same deal with Bilal Powell, McCaffrey, and these guys. But Woodhead isn't even really the starting guy. There's West over there in Baltimore. I don't really like anyone on Baltimore for my fantasy teams, and especially not Woodhead for a standard league. And then we get to Michael Crabtree being selected right before me. If my guy had been taken, I probably would have gone with Crabtree. But luckily, the guy that I wanted all along falls to me, and that is Greg Olsen. I was ecstatic about that because after Olsen, Kelce and maybe Graham. There's a big fall off in tight ends for me. And then finally, we've got Allen Robinson, Jarvis Landry. I can't knock the selections too much. It'll be interesting to see what happens with Landry because his value has dropped recently quite a bit. Now, moving on to the 6th round, Kelvin Benjamin, first selection. At this point, I knew that I wanted to address either the wide receiver or the running back position, but I wasn't too high on Gillislee. Now, interestingly enough, guys like Dalvin Cook were still there. So was Joe Mixon. I think a lot of people in my league were scared off by the rookies, and you'll see that because Mixon lasted very long once we keep going. So for me, it was between a couple guys. It was between Martavis Bryant, Drew Brees, and Dalvin Cook. So what I actually ended up doing is kind of reached on Martavis Bryant a little bit, but I think the guy has crazy potential. So for that reason, I went with him. I think opposite Antonio Brown, he will be a top 15 wide receiver. Then we've got Drew Brees next. I was kind of debating whether I should take him or not, but I thought I could probably land someone that'll be just as good or only a little bit worse later on. Then we've got Jamison Crowder, and then Dalvin Cook, the aforementioned. I think this is a great value pick for Dalvin Cook, especially if he plays up to all that hype that he is getting. Then we've got Larry Fitzgerald, Cam Newton. To me, a little bit of a reach for Cam, but as you can see by the team name, Cam and Friends, maybe a little bit biased there. I would have much rather had a guy like Jameis or even Mariota or even Matt Ryan. So keep it going. We've got Rashard Matthews and then Doug Martin. I think this is a little early for Doug Martin. He's going to be suspended for a couple games, and then to be honest with you, I think in terms of fantasy relevance, he's kind of almost on the downside. And let's move on to the 7th round. We've got Eddie Lacy, LeGarrette Blount, Mark Ingram. You see that running back trend reappear again. Then you've got Eifert, probably the next best available tight end. Stephon Diggs, Adrian Peterson. I thought this Adrian Peterson was a good value pick here. Then Delaney Walker. And I saw that kind of run on quarterbacks begin. So for that reason, I decided I'm going to go ahead, take Matt Ryan. I love the potential of pairing him up with Devonta Freeman. So every time they connect, and because Freeman is such a big pass catcher, I'll get that double up in terms of yards and touchdowns if there are any receiving touchdowns to be had. And then Russell Wilson goes, and so does Sammy Watkins. Now, going to the 8th round, Frank Gore, first selection, then Amir Abdullah. Then pick came to me, and I thought, I'm going to add Tavon Coleman. I know I already have Freeman, but in terms of insurance, if for some reason Freeman goes down, I don't have to scour the waiver wire. I have Coleman, going to keep him on my bench, and I think this is an excellent insurance pick. Then we've got Perkins, Rob Kelly, Eric Decker, and like I said, this is how far Joe Mixon fell. Potentially could be the steal of this round, the steal of the draft with the one of the last selections in the 8th round. But, I think a lot of the things that scared off people, if you see the NFL projections, they actually have 0 points projected for Mixon, which, that's definitely not accurate. But I don't like Mixon because he has to contend with Hill and with Gio, and because of that, I'm scared off by him, and I personally would not have taken him. Then we've got Jonathan Stewart, Martellus Bennett, and Dak Prescott being taken. I thought this was a reach for Dak, but that's just me. I really like the Martellus Bennett selection. And then going to the 9th round, we have Devontae Parker. I know he's been getting a lot of hype recently and right around the number 60 or 70 overall selection. So I think this is a good value for Devontae Parker. Then we've got Latavius Murray, Matt Forte, Sanders, and a guy that I was targeting here was actually Garcon. He won a couple of picks before me. I think he'll have an excellent year, probably a little bit better in PPR. Then we've got Golden Tate, Deshaun Jackson, and at this point, I knew I had to fill the flex position, and I thought Brandon Marshall was the next best available guy. Went ahead with Marshall, and afterwards, we had Hunter Henry and Kyle Rudolph go. And I said I needed to fill the flex spot. I know I already took Martavius Bryant, but this is a league that has 2 flexes, and that was the reason that I also added Brendan Marshall. And then round 10, I was actually thinking about Thomas Rawls earlier in round 9, but I did not want to risk Brendan Marshall being on. So I thought maybe if I wait, I could get Rawls. That wasn't the case, but it's okay. Mike Wallace goes, and then I know I'm going to get a lot of crap for this. I was the first one to take a defense, went ahead, picked the Seattle defense, but I don't regret it. They just added Sheldon Richardson. I'm not going to have to worry about streaming defenses. And continuing, we've got Theo, Corey, Mariota being taken, Jeremy Hill, Jeremy Maclin, Kevin White, and James White. I really like the Mariota pickup here. Shows that when you're patient, you can still get a really quality quarterback guy and a guy that's being projected as a top 10 quarterback in fantasy. And then we got John Brown. And then here, I really like the Darren McFadden pickup. I was actually going to scoop him up if he made his way back to me in this round, but I wasn't lucky enough to do that. And then if you thought picking a defense was bad, well, we've got our first kicker off the board and Stephen Gostkowski. Following that, we've got Big Ben, and you see the drop that Andrew Luck had. Now, it's going to be very dependent on what happens with him, how he's going to start the season. But if he does play, then this team that took him already had another quarterback. So I think it's a good mix in having Andrew Luck on your bench. And I was actually going to take Jameis Winston, have him as my insurance guy, use him as trade bait or something like that. But it's okay. I was going to find another guy to take his spot. Then Tyrell Williams, another target of mine, goes in case Keenan Allen gets hurt. But instead, I went with the consolation prize in Kirk Cousins. I think that's an excellent backup choice. And again, can use him as trade bait later on. And then finally, we've got Zach Ertz, Corey Davis. Now, I'll go all the way up to the 12th round, and then I'll kind of just show you how my team finished up. Because at this point, after the 13th through 15th round are pretty questionable picks by everyone. We've got the Chiefs. We've got Terrence West. Derrick Henry was my pickup. I think this was a pretty good scoop up, especially because if anything happens to DeMarco Murray, Henry becomes, a top 5 maybe running back. And then we've got Thielen, Jack Doyle, the Texans defense, Broncos defense, Panthers, Falcons, Giants defense. So you saw that run on defenses. And with that, let me actually transition to my team and kind of show you how the final thing looks. And let's start from top to bottom. I've got Matt Ryan at quarterback. I know obviously he's not going to have his MVP season like he did last year, but still, I think was a good selection where I got him. And the reason I even like that more is because I pair him up with Devonta Freeman. And again, I've told you I really like that quarterback running back combo. After Freeman, I've got Isaiah Crowell. I think that's a guy that has a lot of potential. Scares me that he's on the Browns, but they've got a decent offensive line, so hopefully I'll keep my fingers crossed and it'll work out. And then A.J. Green, T.Y. Hilton. I really like those 2 wide receivers. Greg Olsen, my tight end. I think where I got him, great value again. And then I mentioned to you 2 flexes. My first one was Martavius Bryant, then adding Brendan Marshall. Very happy with that. And then looking at the bench, I think it's a pretty solid bench actually, but that'll most times be the case in these 10-man leagues because there are more players available. We've got Kirk Cousins, Tavon Coleman in case anything happens with Freeman, Derrick Henry kind of as insurance for DeMarco Murray, Jamal Williams, same kind of deal if anything happens to Ty, and then Dante Moncrief, went ahead and picked him with my second to last round pick, and that was again for insurance if anything happens to TY. So with that concludes my final review of my actual draft. So let me know what you guys think. In terms of a letter grade, honestly, I love this team. I think it has an A written all over it. I fully expect to be in the playoffs, and From there, obviously anything can happen, but I think I've positioned myself well to make it to the playoffs. Let me know what you guys think. Did you like my picks? How would you rank this roster? And as always, like, subscribe, and I'll see you guys in future videos.